From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. Glad you are with us tonight. Tonight we are talking about historic buildings in Nashville, the impact that gentrification is having on our historic buildings. And we're going to look at some. We're going to look at some we've lost. We're going to look at some that are endangered. This is different than the Nashville 9 that we recently did. We're going to take a bigger picture type look. And happy to have with us Nashville's historian, essentially, Dr. Carole Bucy. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
You are our county historian, as appointed by Mayor Carl Dean.
That's correct.
And you teach, and you've been on the show before, and I'm just glad to have you back.
Thank you.
And so you have a PowerPoint.
I brought some pictures.
You brought pictures, which I love, and we're going to go through that in a moment. But let's talk big picture. What's happening? What impact is gentrification having on our historic buildings?
Gentrification is having a great deal to do with our historic buildings because we are bringing more people in, our population is rising, and people have the money to buy houses that are certainly fine houses, but yet they are tearing them down and putting up much bigger houses. Now, we've had waves of housing bubbles in the past. I mean, right after World War II, with the GIs coming home and money for housing in addition to some other things, the GIs wanted a newer house. And so here is the city of Nashville down here, and then you're surrounded by Davidson County, which is beautiful, green, hilly land, gorgeous places to build a house, raise your family. And so you see housing developments that were built in the late 40s and 50s, built all the way around in every neighborhood, way up out around the circumference, the perimeter of the city of Nashville. And so these houses were big houses, mainly because if you lived in the county did not have a sewer system, and so you had to have a septic tank, which meant you had to have an acre lot.
Oh,
so
wow.
There are all of these subdivisions in every direction, north, south, east, west, and all the points in between, that have 1 acre lots, and they have these 1950s ranch-style houses. The dream house was a house with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a 2-car garage.
Why is it in our nature to preserve it? When you look at America, it seems like it's always about progress. It's move onward, upward, bigger, better. And so people would say that's positive. It's gotten us, to move forward. What about that?
Well, we're forgetting a lot and putting a lot under the bulldozer's nose, and the bulldozer is getting a lot, and we're not saving the stories. And you drive around town, and church attendance at the traditional churches, for example, is really kind of suffering. There are many churches that have very small congregations, whereas in the 50s, they had robust congregations. Now, why is that? Well, number one, all the stores in Nashville were closed in the state of Tennessee. In fact, were closed because of the state's blue law, so you couldn't have stores open on Sunday. Number two, many women living out there in the suburbs did not work, and so they had time for church activities. Children's sports were not very big then. Children took piano lessons and a variety of other things, but you didn't have all of these leagues for girls and boys, and I think sports is a really good thing for kids to be doing. It really provides a lot of educational experience that you don't get in a classroom when you're working with a team. And then we have professional sports on Sunday. And so, as I understand it, the Downtown Presbyterian Church owns a parking lot, but they lease it out to a parking company, and so during the times when the Titans are playing in town on Sunday, they have to have their worship service earlier to vacate the parking lot for the Titans crowd to come in.
And I bet they make good money.
And this is a country that was hanging there on the Atlantic seaboard when the country was born, and yet always there was that you can start over if you just move move west. And so you see first the crossing of the Appalachian Mountains right here to Tennessee, and then you're seeing the people here a generation or two saying, well, let's go across the Mississippi. Let's go to Texas, where we hear that cotton just grows like the head of a person. It grows that tall. Cotton is abundant out there in Texas. And so you see this constant migration, and people do not save things. Even I can remember my mother's generation. She didn't want the old stuff that her mother had in her house. You know, she aspired to have new things. And so, you know, no one's children today really want their parents' stuff, their furniture, their dishes, their pots and pans. And we are by nature a wasteful society because we've had the space. But now the big problem is, where are we going to put all our trash? Landfills are becoming an increasingly serious problem. And we have not had this problem because mainly most of our trash was taken out of the county to a landfill that the city was paying for the trash to be put. So we we are a wasteful society. Yes, we're trying to recycle to some small degree, but that doesn't amount to all the stuff that goes in the trash.
We're going to look at some pictures of buildings we've lost. I want to ask you about two right now that are endangered: Ernest Tubb Record Shop and the Nashville Arcade. How concerned are you about both of those situations?
Well, I have heard that the Ernest Tubb Record Shop is closing very soon, and it is going to probably be closed unless something drastically different happens, because the people there have announced their intention to close, which means that the rent is high or that they're not getting enough traffic to make a profit. You know, so many of the other venues are bigger than the Ernest Tubb Record Shop, and I think that puts them at an advantage. Now, the arcade is one of the most interesting places in Nashville, and yet the managers of the arcade have a hard time getting businesses to come in and lease the property and be able to make a profit. And you know, they have tried to put art galleries in parts of that upstairs. It is a magnificent thing, and yet it's the whole notion of downtown shopping that we gave up as a society in every city the size of Nashville in the 1950s, when suburban strip malls were created, and then came the malls with indoor shopping. I think 100 Oaks was probably the first one. Now, technically speaking, the arcade should be like an indoor mall, but you've got to get people wanting to shop. And a major barrier to shopping downtown now is the price of parking, because the price of parking continues to go up on a regular basis. And so to come and have lunch downtown and pay $20 to park is a little bit on the steep side for most people. And so the arcade, I really hope it can be saved. I hope Ernest Tubb's Record Shop can be saved. And I would add a third business here in town, not really a business, but a third building that has magnificent history, that is in real danger of being either drastically changed or completely taken out, and that's the Morris Memorial Building, where the National Baptist Publishing Company was. It's on Charlotte, almost before you get to the Metro Courthouse on the left, and it was designed by McKissick and McKissick. The National Baptist, like the other publishing companies of religious material here in town, the National Baptists are no longer publishing anything there, so it's basically an empty building. But talk about potential. Mayor Briley, when he was the mayor, appointed a task force to make a recommendation to Metro to see if Metro could buy it for Metro offices. But the rehab of the building was going to be exorbitantly expensive, and I understand the building is still on the market, but I've been in and out of that building, and it has got so much potential.
Wow, I hope it can be saved. Okay, the property manager says he plans to restore the Nashville Arcade to its prior glory, so that's good. Ernest Tubb Yeah, it is going to close sometime this spring at an undisclosed date, and it's been there since 1951, so it's been there forever. But good grief, the changes down there are enormous. All right, I want to put up some pictures. I think the first picture is Grundy Place. We'll probably have to go to a commercial in a moment.
Okay.
But what's the situation here with Grundy Place Polk Place? Tell us what that is and what's the situation.
All right, this is a house downtown on Union Street. It looks, it's directly across from the War Memorial Auditorium. It was built by the lawyer Felix Grundy, arguably respected and had a reputation of being the finest criminal lawyer in the South. He also became a U.S. Senator. He was heavily involved in politics during that Jacksonian era, and he and his wife, Ann Rogers Grundy, built this house for their family to live in. Ridley Wills, who has done a great deal of research on historic houses here in town, said that this was by far the finest antebellum, meaning before the Civil War, house that was in the city. So Felix Grundy died, and his widow sold it to James K. Polk, who at the time was President of the United States. He and his wife, Sarah Childress Polk, had no children, but President Polk had announced when he campaigned for the office that if he was elected, he would only serve one term. And so as a result of that, they were planning to come back to Nashville and live out the rest of their lives in this house that they had bought, and they would be coming back in 1849. So they're getting the house prepared. The Polks come back a rather leisurely way. They take a boat all the way around from the Chesapeake Bay around Florida and then up the New Orleans, sort of a farewell tour, if you will, stopping here and there. And when they did that, they were not able to move into the house because the renovations were not quite ready. In the meantime, President Polk, who was always very, very frail physically, he succumbed to what we think was an epidemic of cholera, and he died less than 6 months after he left the White House. So as a result of that, the Polks took hold of the house, but Mrs. Polk was the only Polk that lived in that house.
And what, is it gone now? Or
is absolutely.
So that's gone?
The house is gone. Arguably the finest house built in Nashville before the Civil War, and it is where the Hyatt Regency had a hotel with a revolving restaurant at the top, and now I think it's a Sheraton there.
Right, okay. Yeah, right across from the legislature. All right, we have Reverend Fuzz on the line. It's always great to hear from Reverend Fuzz. Hello, Reverend Fuzz.
Hey, man, I got a question for your guest.
Go right ahead.
I've been pretty involved with the Morris building and trying to get something to happen there. So I wanted to ask your guest, what ideas would she have that could happen with that Morris building? What do you think? We know we've looked at a lot of things, so what do you think you would recommend? I know the history is tremendous, the history of that building in that corner. It is really tremendous. Nashville don't know. But what do you think could happen to that building?
Well,
thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Fuzz.
I think it could be used for office buildings. You know, Metro government does not own enough office space for many of its agencies and branches. So Metro rents a great deal of property in the vicinity of the courthouse, and then there's one kind of warehouse where a lot of documents are stored out near the airport. But Metro rents property, and so I think it would be a great annex to be a Metro building. I also think that it could be multi-purpose. You could have a City of Nashville museum in the front, the downstairs floor of that building. The building designed by McKissick and McKissick is truly unique, and you could even have offices in the remaining floors. It has a chapel. I'm sure you've been in there, Reverend Fuzz, and it has that beautiful chapel that's the length of the building that could be used as meeting places. There are a multitude of things that could be done with that, but the price tag is pretty high, and at the time, you know, the citizens were going to, everybody felt like the citizens were going to be furious if Metro spent several $1 million buying that piece of property. So although this committee that Mayor Briley appointed, of which I was a member, recommended that the city buy it, the timing was just not right for the city to buy it. So, you know, we don't want to see that building taken out. Some people have talked about building some floors above it and making a tower. They're also talking about that on that Federal Reserve building over on, I guess it's 3rd Avenue. So it has great potential. When we discussed it as a possible place for homeless people to live, the homeless advocates on our committee said that they felt like the price of the property was going to be too expensive for Metro to be able to use that for a place for homeless residents, that the homeless residents need to be in an area where the property values are not quite as expensive as downtown Nashville.
And now that building, it's called, what is it called? The
Morris Memorial Business.
Morris Memorial, okay.
The National Baptist, and it is just magnificent. It's going to have a rehab, but it's really lovely.
All right, Reverend Fuzz, thanks for the call. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back, and we're going to keep going through this PowerPoint of yours, which is fascinating. I love just hearing about Grundy Place. Rokeby Mansion is next.
Okay, I want to say one thing about the Grundy Mansion.
All right, we'll take a break. Be back right after this.
Mrs. Pope lived there.